Welcome back to the Lost Book of Herbal Remedies. I'm Emma, and today we're tackling a serious topic: heavy metal exposure and its alarming connection to cardiovascular disease. We'll be covering everything from environmental contamination to dietary risks, and even the role of herbal remedies in combating these toxic exposures.
That's right, Emma. Heavy metals like lead, cadmium, and arsenic are more than just industrial byproducts. They're present in the environment, in the food we eat, and even in common household products. Over time, exposure to these metals can cause major health issues, especially for your heart.
And it's not just exposure from industrial areas. While we often think of metal pollution from factories, there's also a growing concern about heavy metals in spices and herbs that many of us consume every day. In fact, studies show that these metals are linked to an increased risk of cardiovascular disease and stroke.
Exactly, Emma. There's a fascinating study from southeast Sweden where communities near glasswork factories were exposed to high levels of airborne lead emissions. Over a span of 40 years, those living in these contaminated areas were found to have a significantly higher risk of heart disease and stroke. And the problem didn't stop at airborne exposure. It even extended to the food they ate.
That's a great point, Alex. The study found that people who consumed local crops and livestock in these contaminated regions had higher levels of arsenic, lead, and cadmium in their bodies. And these metals weren't just detected in their blood, they were linked to inflammation, a major driver of cardiovascular disease.
What's really interesting is that this exposure isn't just historical. It's still happening, and climate change is making it worse. A recent study showed that heavy rainfall can increase the bioaccessibility of these metals in the soil, making them easier for plants to absorb. So after extreme weather events, communities in lowland areas can experience spikes in heavy metal exposure from their environment and food.
That's a huge concern, especially as we see more extreme weather events. And it's not just the air or soil that's contaminated. There's also growing evidence that the herbs and spices we use in our cooking may be tainted with heavy metals. Recent reviews have found toxic metals like lead and cadmium in spices from regions like the Middle East, North Africa, and India.
Absolutely. Spices like caraway, cardamom, cloves, and ajwain seeds have been found to contain varying levels of these toxic metals. While these spices are cherished for their flavor and medicinal properties, the contamination is a real threat. For example, spices sourced from Turkey were found to have hazardous levels of cadmium, which can pose serious long-term health risks, especially for the cardiovascular system.
It's eye-opening to realize how easily we can be exposed to these harmful metals through everyday items like spices. This is why global vigilance and stringent food safety practices are so important. Unfortunately, countries with less strict regulations may still be exporting these contaminated products, so the risks extend beyond just one region.
That's true, Emma. And while most spices are not carcinogenic, the presence of lead and cadmium can still lead to serious health issues. It's a complex problem that requires both better regulations and greater awareness among consumers about where their food is coming from and what's in it.
So what are the implications for public health? Well, the study also highlights the need for better food safety monitoring. In addition to industrial sources of contamination, there's a pressing need for more rigorous testing of spices and herbs, especially those from regions with weaker regulations. Heavy metal contamination in food is not just a consumer issue. It's a public health crisis.
That's right. But it's not just the contamination we need to worry about. It's the long-term health impacts. One particularly revealing study from the multi-ethnic study of atherosclerosis looked at the relationship between urinary metal levels and coronary artery calcification, a key indicator of cardiovascular disease. What they found was pretty alarming. Higher levels of metals like cadmium and tungsten were associated with more severe arterial calcification over a 10-year period.
And that's really where the danger lies. Coronary artery calcification is a precursor to serious cardiovascular events like heart attacks and strokes. It's one thing to think about heavy metals building up in your body, but when you realize how directly they affect your arteries and heart health, it becomes even more concerning.
And what's fascinating is that it's not just cardiovascular health at risk. There's emerging research linking heavy metal exposure to glycemic changes, especially in underserved populations. One study found that higher levels of arsenic and cadmium in the urine were linked to increased risk of type 2 diabetes in Mexican Americans. This shows how widespread the effects of heavy metals can be.
Exactly. The impacts of heavy metal exposure go beyond heart health and touch on metabolic health as well. And while these metals are a serious threat, we can also take steps to mitigate the risks through our diets. For example, a Mendelian randomization study found that higher intakes of magnesium, vitamin C, and folate, vitamin B9, were associated with a reduced risk of stroke. These nutrients play a protective role and can help counteract some of the damage done by heavy metal exposure.
That's a great point, Emma. It's encouraging to know that while heavy metals pose a significant risk, there are ways we can reduce that risk through nutrition and detoxification.
Yes, in the Lost Book of Herbal Remedies, we outline several herbs that are particularly effective for detoxifying heavy metals from the body and supporting heart health. One of the best herbs for detoxification is cilantro, also known as coriander. It has been shown to chelate heavy metals like lead, cadmium, and arsenic, helping the body excrete them more efficiently.
And this brings us to the importance of herbal remedies, which have been used for centuries to support the body's natural detox processes and promote cardiovascular health. And we can't forget about milk thistle. It's one of the best herbs for supporting liver health, which is critical for detoxifying the body. Milk thistle contains silymarin, a compound that enhances the liver's ability to process and eliminate toxins, including heavy metals.
Another powerful herb is garlic. Garlic's sulfur compounds bind to heavy metals, making it easier for the body to excrete them. Plus, garlic has been shown to improve cardiovascular health by lowering blood pressure and cholesterol levels.
That's the beauty of these herbs. They offer multiple benefits. While they help detoxify the body, they also protect the heart. Another excellent herb for cardiovascular support is hawthorn berry, which improves blood flow in the coronary arteries and reduces inflammation. It's been used traditionally to treat heart disease and hypertension.
And let's not forget about Arjuna bark. This lesser-known herb from traditional Indian medicine strengthens the heart muscle, lowers LDL cholesterol, and helps regulate blood pressure. It's a great herb to include for anyone concerned about heart health.
One more to add to the list is green tea. Green tea contains antioxidants called catechins, which protect the blood vessels from oxidative stress. Drinking 3 to 4 cups of green tea daily can support overall cardiovascular health, especially when dealing with heavy metal exposure.
And for those looking to support their body's detox and cardiovascular health, there are nutritional supplements like magnesium and vitamin C that can offer additional protection. Magnesium, in particular, helps prevent stroke by regulating blood pressure and keeping arteries flexible.
That's true. But before starting any new herbal regimen or supplements, it's always important to consult with a healthcare provider, especially if you have any pre-existing conditions or are on medications.
So to wrap up, heavy metal exposure is a serious public health concern, especially when it comes to cardiovascular disease. But by being mindful of what we consume and incorporating detoxifying herbs and protective nutrients into our diet, we can reduce the risks.
Exactly. And if you want to dive deeper into any of the research we've discussed today, head over to herbalbloom.org to read the full article. There you'll find more insights into the links between heavy metal exposure and cardiovascular health, along with tips on how to protect yourself.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Lost Book of Herbal Remedies. Remember, protecting your health is within your control. Stay informed, stay healthy, and we'll see you next time.